Welcome, everyone. It's a packed house. Great to see everybody at our club meeting. It's Thursday, October the 5th. I'm Tony Kemper, head of the DePaul School and president of our club, and my voice is booming. Please welcome Harriet Friedlander, retired in 2012 as executive director of ElderServe. Harriet will deliver our invocation. Harriet.
My pleasure to introduce our newest member to the club, Mr. Herbert Warren, who's the owner of the Old Louisville Inns. Some background on Herb. He's married to Gail Walters Warren, who is the former president of Leadership Louisville and one of the very first Rotarians in Louisville. 7 children, 17 grandchildren, and they own the DuPont Mansion and the Louisville Bourbon Inn and Breakfast in Old Louisville. So I asked him, I said, hey, do you have a place if we wanted to have a little gathering? He said, I can hold 100 people, so that's already up here. For an event. First job, I remember my first job, it was a computer programmer, but this guy, his first job was a trial attorney in the Justice Department under Bobby Kennedy. He was also a partner in a private law firm in upstate New York and later a professor at Cornell University. Joined General Electric Company's legal department in Syracuse, moved to Louisville with GE in 1977. So prior to his owning the 3-bed and breakfasts, which is his hobby, this is what he's doing in retirement. They also, he and his wife owned mediation services, and they taught mediation, conflict management to many institutions in the area. Fascinating fellow. I hope you get a chance to meet him, but this is our newest member, Mr. Herbert Warren. Please give him applause.
We're going to have a picture taken, and here is your plaque. Oh my. With that background, he could serve on about 20 different committees within our club. That is outstanding. Thank you. Greg, thank you too. Thanks. It's always a thrill to have a new member introduced. Why am I a Rotarian? Why do you choose to be a Rotarian? Perhaps it's because we're people of action who desire better, healthier circumstances for our brothers and sisters around the world. Perhaps it's because the 4-way test resonates with our own personal value set and our quest to be people of integrity, people of character. I read some other reasons posted by Rotarians nationwide as to why they choose to be a Rotarian. One, 2000, and a Paul Harris Fellow. Franklin, thanks.
Yeah, I like that picture when I still had hair. It's a great thing about the Rotary Club. You look in the there's pictures from people from 30 years ago. Nobody wants to send in a new one. Anyway, thanks. I'm here today to introduce Keith Sherman, who's the interim executive director and the COO of the University of Louisville Foundation, which is a tax-exempt charity. Its sole mission is to support the University of Louisville. It was about a year ago, after Jim Ramsey had resigned, I want to say September of 16, and the foundation found itself without a leader, and the university went out looking for somebody. They knew they wanted somebody with high business acumen, somebody with a legal background, somebody with high integrity, somebody without any personal ties to the folks who had been running the place or the university. And Keith checks all those boxes. He's got an undergraduate degree from UMass at Amherst. He's got a law degree from Boston University. He has executive experience at some of Louisville's most successful businesses. He also started his own business, and he worked for a while with the Red Cross, probably the most globally significant tax-exempt entity in the world. But what the job description probably should have said was they needed somebody who could juggle 10 complex issues and not drop any of them, somebody who could work around the clock, somebody who could navigate pretty big personalities without offending anybody and still obtain the prime directive, which here was restoring public confidence, not only in the foundation but also in the University of Louisville. Somebody who was going to change the culture of an institution by leading by example. And that's what Keith did. And he has worked very hard to clean up what I guess can most kindly be described as a messy situation. I've had an opportunity to observe him firsthand. Wyatt Terrence Combs was named as a new legal counsel to the foundation in April. I've spent a lot of time with Keith in the trenches. I've watched how he prioritizes things. I've watched how he makes decisions. And I can tell all of you, without a doubt, we've got the right guy for the job. He does have the highest integrity, and he doesn't have an agenda other than doing what's right for the University of Louisville. He's the right guy at the right time in what has got to be one of the most difficult jobs in Louisville today. And so I'm proud to be associated with him and happy to introduce him now to give you a little insight into what's going on at the foundation. Keith Sherman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, if you can hear that, is that on? Okay. Glad my mother sent you their notes in before you had to introduce me, so thank you, Franklin. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I understand this is about half the size of what the meetings usually have in terms of attendance, so I was told there probably wouldn't be a lot of interest in what's going on down at the University of Louisville. So I will plead ignorance about the Rotary Club. I'm not a Rotarian, don't know much about it until I heard this just a little while ago. And what struck me incredibly are the 4 truths and test, because I think that those really embody the approach that we've taken to the foundation over the last year. We want to make sure that the information that's getting out there is the truth, and that it's transparent, and that people will be better because of it, that we can redevelop relationships and friendships and have the support for the university that it needs to be successful. Let me tell you a little bit. I don't know if this is working. We'll see. Okay. So Franklin's already stolen some of that thunder. Is this picking up? Can I walk around? Okay. So. Okay, so as Franklin said, I'm not a native Louisvillian, but it's home. I'm going to go back and forth. I can't stand still. It's home. 21 years ago, we relocated from San Francisco. Somebody you know well, I'm sure, in the community, Bruce Lunsford, came out to California where I was representing a long-term care healthcare company. And they were having union issues here, and they were having it across the country, and asked if I would move to Louisville to take over labor and employment for Vencor. And I said, I'm sorry, where? And he said, Louisville. I'm a Northeasterner. And I went from law school to California and didn't look anywhere in between as the plane was flying over. And we came, and my wife and I said, you know, it's okay. Why don't we just lease cars for 2 years and then we can go back home to California? And that was 21 years ago. And this is very much home, and we're thrilled to be here. So, you know, what is the foundation and what isn't the foundation? Because a lot of people don't understand that, and I want you to get a base understanding of it. One, we're a separate institution from the university. We're not part of University of Louisville. We're the University of Louisville Foundation, a separate 501c3. That means we have a separate board of directors. Now, there is some overlap. So to give you an idea, from the Board of Trustees, David Grissom sits on our board. John Schnatter sits on our board. Diane Medley sits on our board as the chairperson. Greg Postal is the interim president, sits on our board ex officio. And Nitin Sane also sits on our board from the trustees. And then we've got 10 at-large members from around the community. And these are absolute, just rock stars. I've been blessed with the board that we have. They're great. They're bright, they're engaged, to a level of granularity you couldn't appreciate, but I get to experience each and every day. There is no question that's off limits. There's no information that's off limits. And they push me every day to keep going, because this work never ends. It's just constantly, there's issue after issue after issue. Our governance is separate. We have our own bylaws and charters, and so we are related to the university because we support the university, but it ends there, okay? We really have 2 missions. And if you think about what a foundation does, we're not athletics, okay? We don't raise money for athletics. If you donate to the U of L Foundation, it doesn't go to athletics. Athletics has its own fundraising arm, and they keep that money to support the athletic endeavors of University of Louisville Athletic Association. We don't raise money. Ken Grossman, when he asked me to speak, will be pleased to say, I'm not asking you for money. We don't raise money. We're the repository of money. The Office of Advancement reports to Greg Postal as the president, and they serve as a part of the university. So the university raises its own money. They go out and they speak to generous people across the country for donations to support various initiatives. Now, those initiatives typically are student scholarships and endowed chairs and faculty positions. That's the typical reason that money is raised. When that money comes into the university, it comes to the foundation, and that's when we come in. We're the steward of that money. We invest it. We put it in various bank accounts depending upon what a donor tells us they want done with that money. We account for it, and then as the university wants to spend that money, we ensure they've spent the money consistent with donor intent, and then we give it to the university, and it's done on a reimbursement basis. They actually have to spend the money first, send us a receipt, and then we validate that it was done for the right purposes, and we send them a check once a month. Okay? So a lot of people don't understand that that's actually our role. Now, many of you may want to ask questions about what happened in the past. Let's talk about Dr. Ramsey. Let's talk about other folks that were in leadership positions. And what Franklin shared as part of the introduction, I don't know the prior leadership. I've never met them. That's a true statement. And I assure you, as I've assured everybody from the day I came in, December 1st of 16, it's not for me to have an opinion about what happened or why it happened. The past, for me, simply informs where we're going in the future and how we're going to get there. Period. And I'll allow people far smarter than I to figure out whether it should have, should have happened the way it did, shouldn't have happened the way it was done, and if there are issues, I'll let them worry about that. I'm worried about how do we make sure today that what we do will follow best practices, give you and anybody else who gives a dollar the confidence that we're protecting your money, it's safe, and it'll be safe in perpetuity. And that's part of our mission. Our mission is to ensure for endowments that the corpus, the principle of that money, is in place in perpetuity. We'll never touch it. Okay, that we're investing it in a way that will ensure consistently reliable returns. Now, one of the things we get asked because of the state of the endowments and accounts is, what happened to my money? And how come you're only getting X percent return in the marketplace when my Schwab, Fidelity, Hilliard account is doing 15, 18, 20% this year? How come you're only doing 6, 8, 12? Well, I'll tell you, last year was 12.6%. Okay, any of us who have investments would readily take 12.6% returns in a given year, right? An endowment, by definition, isn't looking to maximize market returns. It's never going to see the high highs, and it should never see the low lows. The endowment, by definition, cruises in the middle because it wants consistent returns every year, so it wants a low volatility percentage. And so we've done that. I'm going to show you some numbers here in a little bit to show you how we've done and what's happened to that money. The university counts on us. We spend anywhere from $30 to $80 million a year on campus. That means we reimburse that much money for what's going on academically. Student scholarships are primarily funded almost exclusively by the foundation. There are 1,800 different endowment accounts to fund those activities. So it gives you an idea of how many kids and then how many professors' salaries are being paid for because of endowments set up by donors who want a certain expertise and experience brought to campus to pass on to future generations. So achieving good returns and keeping those endowments around in perpetuity. Now, it's been a long 18 months. It's been a long 18 months, the past 10 months, okay? But if you can imagine, we've been under an audit environment since 2015. Now, if any of you have businesses or have been involved in a business but subject to your annual audit, Multiply that by 100 times in terms of the scrutiny that we've been under. There is nothing we can do that people aren't watching, asking questions about, and not just the auditors, but the media and our donors and the university and the faculty members and the staff. Everybody wants to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how come we did it. And I can tell you that on every issue that we present, if I'm talking to 4 people, there are 12 opinions of why we should have done it maybe differently. The state audit was called upon. Now, you've read about this in the paper, but the state audit came about because the Board of Trustees said they didn't like the way things were going between the university and the foundation. And so the state auditor went in and started an audit that didn't get a lot of traction. Weren't getting as much cooperation as they wanted in terms of getting information. And so it was paused. New state auditor came in. The board, there was some changes in leadership, and we reinitiated that audit. By the time I showed up December 1st, the audit itself was done. The report yet hadn't come out. It came out about December 15th, 16th. And in it, they identified 7 key governance issues and a dozen plus issues of recommendations. And in the midst of that, because the audit had not maybe happened as well or as quickly as the Board of Trustees wanted, they also decided to commission a forensic investigation by an outside third party out of Chicago called Alvarez and Marcel. And in October of 16, before the report from the state ever came out, they hired A&M to do this forensic investigation. And that started about December 17th. So you can imagine what a week that was. The 16th to get the state audit report and know that we had about 15 days to respond in terms of what we were going to do about it. And then A&M was setting up meetings saying, we'd like to introduce ourselves because we're going to be in your stuff like nobody's business. They too came out, and that was a financial audit. They had about a half a dozen key things that they identified and a lot of recommendations as well. If you take nothing else away from this discussion, there isn't a single thing from the state audit and the forensic investigation that hasn't been addressed by changes in policy, bylaws, or something I'll explain as a memorandum of understanding, except for one thing, and full and fair disclosure. We did not agree to institute an internal audit function at the foundation. We're just not big enough, our budget isn't big enough, and we have an annual audit that takes place each year. We just changed auditors. We've got Ernst & Young. In fact, they're just finishing up the audit this week, and I'm thrilled to tell you that there is not a material change or any issues, any material issues that they've identified in the audit this year, so that's great news for us. So Franklin mentioned that I'd worked at the American Red Cross. I did. I got a call from somebody I used to practice law with who sat on the board of the Red Cross in D.C., and they were having some issues, and he said, would you mind going up to D.C. and just help them, consult for a little bit? They have some questions. And I had a couple of small businesses here in town that I owned and operated in. And I said, yeah, that'll be fun. I'll go up and fly up to D.C. and spend a week and talk to them. And in the course of this discussion, they offered me a job. And the job was to become the VP of HR and Labor Relations for the American Red Cross in D.C. And I called my wife and I said, hey, I've always been a capitalist, and I don't shy away from that. But I think it would be a really neat thing to give back. And this will be my chance to serve a mission. So I've committed to a year to work in D.C. And it's going to be fine because I'm just going to commute up every now and then and come back. And what that turned into is every morning I got on the 6 a.m. flight at U.S. Airs. I'd see Phil, literally Phil, at the gate at Stanford. It was then U.S. Air, and we'd say hello, and I'd get on the plane, and I'd fly up, and Thursday night at about 12:30, 11:30 at night, I'd come back. And I did that what turned out to be 5 years. And wonderful organization, very much like this one. I mean, what underlies what they're doing is incredible, and you can see it with Houston and Puerto Rico and others. And when I got there, I started reading, because you should do that when you go someplace. Learn where you are and learn what the culture is and learn what's going on. And I came to find out that Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross, which I didn't know till I'd taken that job. And Clara had a quote that I came across, and it ended up being on my signature block on my email at the Red Cross. And it actually something I handed out to my team here at the foundation the second day I was on the job when we did a team meeting, which is that I defy the tyranny of precedent. And we just can't accept that we do things because they've always been done. And we should always be looking for ways to make them better. And that's really what's driven everything we've done for the last 10 months. Nobody is allowed to say, we do it because we've always done it that way. We have to question, is it the best way to do it? Is it a best practice today? I don't care if it was a best practice in 1985. Is it a best practice in 2017? And we know what we're doing and why. So Clara has continued to touch me even after leaving the Red Cross, several years ago. Here's an eye chart. I'm sure you can see that in the back. And I'll tell you what it says. It says that is, since for the last 20 years, the performance value of our endowment. Okay, and I'll explain it in really simple terms. It's low at the left because we just started, and we were just raising money. And it went up, and it really hit a peak. Sort of in the middle of that slide, you can see we're at a peak, and that's just before the '08 market adjustment. And when the market crashed in '08, we and everybody else got to benefit from that by reducing a reduction in our value. And then a big campaign started, and you remember the billion-dollar campaign, a lot of fundraising and a lot of success. And I will say this, when we moved here in 1996, U of L was a small commuter school. And when you look at the campus today, in my office, I had dinner with him last night. We were at a dinner, and Jim Patterson was sitting 2 seats to my left. And I said, Jim, I want to thank you, because every day I look out of my office, I see the baseball field. Our offices are down by Cardinal Park, and it's wonderful. That's just one example of incredible development and growth on campus. Okay? That money was spent on, that you see to the right side of that account. Now today, literally today, the endowment itself is worth almost $726 million. At $726 million of endowment value, after we took $38 million of adjustments downward effective June 30th of this year. So when we closed the fiscal year, we're on a July 1 fiscal year. We took a $38 million adjustment to the endowment. So if you think about that, we'd be up 760 million or so right now, but we really felt like looking at the value of the way things were counted in the past, what values were attributed to them, they were probably a little high. And so we made adjustments by about 38 million. So here we sit at about $726 million. About 615 of that is managed or advised, really not managed, but advised by an outside third party. And they're called Cambridge Associates out of Boston, Massachusetts. And they are by far the largest group in the world that manages and advises on endowments. And they've done a great job for us. I know that there's been some criticism of them, but I would tell you, they've done what they've been asked to do. Why is the endowment, and then by the way, we manage about 112, 13 million, 15 million internally. And we put that money, by donor direction, those monies are put in accounts at PNC and some other trusts and Vanguard accounts, some things like that, index funds. Is this value good? Is this value not good? I would tell you, it could be a lot better, right? If over the past 8, 10 years, we had not been on such an aggressive spend, that endowment would likely be over $1 billion today. It's not. That happened through compounding, not because of anything else. We'd have gotten about 10 years worth of compounding. We spent at an unsustainable rate. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Okay, you can't, and we all have budgets at our homes, hopefully, right? If you spend each month more than you take in, it is eventually going to catch up with you. And you're either going to have to borrow on your credit cards or take out loans. And that's in essence what's happened to us. Okay, we've got debt, we've got to take care of that debt because we spent more than we were bringing in. And you can't spend 10, 12% if you're only getting 6 or 8% returns in the market. Okay? My job, and if I boiled it down to nothing else, when you look at the campus, it looks so great, the growth and explosion down at U of L. We mortgaged that. We spent too aggressively to get there. My job now is to figure out how to pay it off as quickly as possible so we can put it completely behind us and just continue to look for more growth. Okay? So 726 million. Our returns this year, I told you 12.6%. When you read in the paper that we only really saw 5.4%, I want you to understand it's because of that $38 million adjustment. We saw 12.6, but once you take out that 38 million, it brings us to a net 5.4%. And for those of you that are in finance, that's net of fees. There's a really important chart that you won't be able to see beyond the first row, maybe. You see the red line? Can you see that it's red back there? Yeah, not by accident, but the red line is really just showing you, and to the far left, this is all money in and out of the endowment for the last 20 years. Literal money in and out. It's the actual numbers. And all it's telling us, more than anything, and by the way, if anybody really wants a copy of this deck, if you let us know afterwards, I'll be more than happy to have it distributed. There's no secrets here, and you're certainly entitled to it. The red is basically showing that we've got a return that I'll round numbers to about 12%, 11% over the last 20 years, with a volatility rating that is relatively low. And when I first got into the job and started going around to donors and speaking to groups, they said again, hey, my Schwab account's doing so much better than you're doing, why didn't you just invest in index funds? Why didn't you just put into the S&P 500 and you'd be doing better than you're doing? And the reason is, when you look at it, the S&P does have years that are far better than we do, but its volatility, there are years where it's really good, and there's years where it's really not good. And we're trying, again, to have limited volatility. So what the red shows you is, because of what we've invested in, if we had invested the same dollars in the S&P 500 or in some other indices, we would have less money today than we have because of the way we've invested. So it's telling us that actually the investment choices we've made really make sense. They've allowed us the highest rate of return with the lowest amount of volatility. And that's what you want out of an endowment. We had this dinner I mentioned last night is with really one of the best money managers in the world, a group that's international, and they were saying last night, hey, we expect a 6% return in the market year over year. And I was really so glad to hear that. I spoke to the chief investment officer afterwards, and I said, you're talking about for institutions and not just individuals, right? And he said, yeah. I said, good, because that's the exact number we're counting on this year, is about 6%. And to give you an idea, our spend policy this year, all in, everything, and I'll explain that in a second, is about 5.51%. So what we've done is said, we are not going to spend and allocate equal to or greater than what we expect in the marketplace based upon our advisors' input. And when I say what do we fund the academic units, we fund the Office of Advancement. So that fundraising arm for the university, we pay their activities, and then we pay a small stipend to the Office of the President for his or her strategic initiatives. And the information you read in the paper is accurate. We dramatically cut the allocations to the university this year, and it's because of the charge to ensure that we spend within our means and that we remain sustainable in perpetuity. Okay, so what have we really done? Well, we got a new board, as I said. And we're doing this, why? Well, one, because it's the right thing to do. And you do it because it's the right thing to do. And just by happenstance, it should really help instill donor confidence again that it's a good time to be giving. So we have different committees. We have a real estate foundation that owns our real estate. That's about $180 million worth of real estate that the Real Estate Foundation owns and manages. It's a separate board, a separate 501c3 that I sit on that board and am responsible for that as well. So all in, we're close to $1 billion enterprise. We've got a special committee. You've read about the A&M report. You've read about potential litigation. We have a special committee that's dealing with that. I can't give you more information other than to say we are considering any possible action, offensively or defensively, to make sure that we're protecting our interests, and we're not going to do anything that is going to be speculative or in any way not something that we feel very strongly about, and there's been no decisions made whatsoever about what those would be. So an entirely new board. They get formally oriented now. In the past, in fact, I see my friend Mr. Glasscock here. In the past, he had participated in past orientations where he talked to board members about their obligations and fiduciary duties to the board. And that's a piece of a formal orientation that I'm glad that they got, but we've taken that and expanded upon it. We have actually, formal orientation about all of our financials. Make sure that every board member understands every dollar, what it's for, where it is, how we operate. Because if they don't understand, they can't ask, and they're expected to ask. It talks about their fiduciary duty, talks about conflicts of interest, making sure that everybody is arm's length and that we're doing things completely above board. Open records, I don't know if you know what open records are. If you know what an open records is, other than the media, if you know what an open records is, raise your hand. Good, about almost half. This is where, because we are considered a state agency for purposes of records, we have an obligation to be fully transparent to the public. It's like an information request. People can write to us and ask us for just about anything, and as long as it's not privileged, we have an obligation to give it to them. And I've lost track of how many open records requests we've had since December, and how many pages, but it is in the tens of thousands. And so we spend a lot of time now answering questions and giving up a lot of information, or giving out a lot of information, because people are interested. We've changed our board resolution. Our resolutions are very specific. Our bylaws have been redone twice. They're going through their third major overhaul as I speak. In fact, Franklin, one of his partners, owes me a draft back this week. But we've got those have been redone. We negotiated a memorandum of understanding with the university. That means that it's an actual document exists that outlines the rules in terms of how we're going to operate and who's responsible for what. There are no doubts. In the past, if you boiled it down to one thing that might have contributed to where we are, it was governance. Almost impossible, virtually impossible. I wouldn't be capable of knowing which hat I was wearing if I was wearing the hat of the president of the university and the hat of the president of the foundation. You just can't juggle in your own mind, keep it straight in terms of who you're making decisions for. And if you're making those decisions, the people around you don't know who you're making those decisions for, so the answer is always yes. And so, here we are. I'm running the foundation. Greg Postal's running the university. The MOU lays out exactly who's supposed to do what, when, and how. We've got a reporting obligation to the Board of Trustees every quarter, and I meet with him at least once a month to give him an update of where we are. Again, everything is fully transparent. In essence, we've got the right controls in place. We've got the right processes and procedures in place, and we don't think there's any way that what's happened in the past could happen again. Our spending is sustainable. We don't compensate employees at the university anymore. Something that was happening from the foundation is they were paying their employees and folks at the university. We don't do that anymore. The university stands on its own. It's got to have an operating budget that is balanced. They can't come to the foundation any longer and say, we might have overspent, we need some more money. Okay? That's now the obligation of the university, and they've balanced their budgets. We don't have a deferred comp plan anymore. We have terminated the deferred comp plan. Not only do we not have that, so we don't have the issue of gross ups, but we don't gross up any other pay. Okay? Pay is pay. And the gross up is something that got a lot of attention. We actually implemented a line item budget. Now, for those of you that are business owners or work in finance, you know what and how much fun budget process is. But it is line by line. Every expense we're going to have is laid out for the board and for the public, and the media attends our meetings and takes pictures and tweets that out, and we're held to that. Every month we report on budget to actual, just like anybody else would be expected to do, and if we've got a variance, we better be able to explain it. And in fact, as we're talking to the university now, we go back and let them know as well when we've exceeded our budget if something came up we hadn't anticipated. We're also looking at all of our real estate. Like I said, about $180 million worth of real estate. Some of it is sitting, not generating revenue. Now, some of it exists because of strategic needs, strategically located right in the center of campus or adjacent to campus, and some of it isn't. And so we're evaluating every piece of real estate we have, and we're actually putting some on the market as we speak. I guess, again, if I was to say anything, every dollar in, every dollar out, we know exactly where it came from and where it's going. And we're working very closely now with our Office of Advancement to make sure that they too are communicating that to donors as those issues come up. I will tell you, we meet monthly as a board. It seems like all we're doing is getting ready for board meetings, but it's a lot of work if you're going to do it right. And we're doing it right. There's a lot of information that gets put out. Eventually, I imagine we'll go back to quarterly meetings, which will be much more manageable, but for now we're doing that. See if there's anything else I really want to make sure, because I know I'm running out of time. So, I guess that if I could leave you with something before I know there's going to be some questions, it is not the same foundation it was a year ago. We're just not. It's unrecognizable. For people that were here that had left, if they came back, they would realize that it's just a different place. And I think that the future for us is exceptionally bright. We're stable, our returns are great, our processes are in place, a clean bill of health from our audit, the relationship with the university has been renewed, we're developing trust again, even across campus, where people wondered, what were we really doing? I meet with the faculty senate and the staff senate and their representatives to make sure that they understand what we're doing, so they know that we're here to do one thing, and that's to support them. And that we're going to make sure that we have that money long term to do just that. So, we're going to partner here with U of L and the trustees. They can have a lot of say in terms of making suggestions to us and how we can constantly make things better. Somebody said to me, "Are you glad that this is over? That the hard work is over?" And I would tell you that it isn't over. It never ends. Okay, a lot of hours to put in reform and governance and controls. In a way, that's the easy part. The hard part is going to be making sure we don't get lax again and we adhere to all of these new things with rigor. So with that, I will say thank you.
Keith agreed that, of course, we would have question and answer time after the meeting, and we'll stay for a little bit longer. Those that do need to leave for appointments and such at 1, we certainly understand. But let's do have some questions first. Thank you for such a thorough and gracious presentation.
Thank you, Tony. Ken Grossman. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Franklin. Also, I agree, we do have the right man for the job. It's a wonderful presentation. A couple things. I was remiss in that I didn't introduce your guests, and I want to thank your wife, Karen, because I know she's the reason you came back to Louisville, and we're very glad you're here. Karen Sherman was an executive at Yum and now is an independent consultant. And also, Keith's other guest is Scott Jennings, who I usually see on CNN, who has Run Switch PR. So Keith brought some wonderful guests with him, and thank you all for coming also. So my question, and I know this is a little bit off of what the Foundation's mission is, but I wonder, with the decrease in investment and that the Foundation has had to do because of the financial situation, how's that affected academics at the university? How's it affected morale? And what's happening with enrollment at the university?
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for coming.
Could have thrown a softball, chose not to. Okay. I think, first of all, morale is just okay, and I would say only just okay. The people that are on campus love the University of Louisville. And, the faculty, the staff, and even the students, I mean, every time you see something show up in a headline that's negative, it's just another shot. And people get tired, and it doesn't feel great. And that's just the honest answer, right? I mean, it's just not great. But what I would tell you is they're also, because of that support for the university, very resilient and really want to see it be successful. And so everybody really is pulling together. The number of meetings and the amount of hours that people put in cross-functionally to work has been really remarkable. And so I think that it's okay. It's not less than okay. In terms of academics, our academics haven't faltered. They've only gotten better. And it's unfortunate that the school doesn't get the recognition for all the academic work that's going on down there. Professors are fully invested, they're fully engaged, the students are. Enrollment, our freshman class coming in this year was either the biggest or second biggest class in history. And the number of applicants they got last year was by far the most applicants the school had ever seen. But when things keep coming out that are negative, or we're on probation with SACs, you will see some people make a decision to go someplace else where it would have been a slam dunk for them to come to U of L. We're really encouraged. SACs came in. I got to spend 2 days with them, along with the university folks. Really encouraged by that visit. We think that every sign is leading towards the fact we'll be off probation in December when they vote. I think that'll just recharge people that were applying and being accepted in the past to come. You saw the news. We've got more Fulbright scholars at U of L than all other state institutions in Kentucky combined. A lot of grant money being received for research and medicine. So a lot of really good things going on. And so I think everybody is cautiously optimistic. We've got some current things to get through that we will, and I think we're going to be in great shape.
Hi, I'm Judy Handmaker. Thank you for the sheet on the page on our tables. It says, update foundation website to share public and financial information. Will there be any means where someone in the public can use the webpage to send questions so that to ensure transparency?
That's a great idea. I'm glad Scott Jennings is here. So, you know, we could probably do, yeah, in fact, there is a spot on there already. If you click the executive director's page, there's actually a spot right there where you can send me an email and ask your questions, and you know, we're committed to, obviously, transparency, getting back to you.
I only ask that because of just recently all the stories we hear of everything that's going on, and so many are contradictory. It would be nice in the public if you could go to the webpage and then find out what the truth really is.
It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Larry?
Thank you very much for coming. My name is Larry Sloan, and my question has to do with how the endowment is structured to benefit the various parts of the university. For instance, how much is either in terms of the total endowment benefiting the medical school, or how much is in terms of total benefits, actual benefits on a yearly basis going to each particular part of the university? Is there a way to answer that question?
There is. I'm not going to because my memory isn't quite that good, but I'll give you this. If you think about $28 million this year has been earmarked to support academics at the university, about $28.5 million or so. And it's dictated by the actual endowment accounts that each school, so the medical school, the dental school, the engineering, arts and sciences, social work, et cetera, how many endowment accounts do they have, the value of those, and then we multiply that by a percentage for spend purposes. By far, the two top recipients of money from us would be the medical school and the engineering school. Those, in terms of endowment values there, they have the largest endowments that we have. I apologize for not being able to give you specific numbers, but if you are interested in that, just shoot me a note and I'm happy to give it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for our final question, John.
Hi, I'm John Huber. I'm wondering if there's what you would consider a best practice for the way foundations are organized. When I think about what we have at U of L, certainly we have the Board of Trustees, and then we have the Board of the Foundation, and then we have a Board of a Real Estate Foundation, and then the fundraising activity is in the university, but it's paid for by the foundation. Is there a best practice for that, and are there any changes being considered?
There are best practices for that. We joined December, so I joined December 1st, I think the 14th or so, maybe the 15th, we joined the Association of Governing Boards, which is the preeminent association for this, and hired a consultant from there to actually help us with all the reform that we're doing, just to make sure we were adopting best practices. There is not one model that is the best. We've adopted many of the best practices today. I would tell you that we are discussing with the university potential changes, but really, until they have a full-time president in place, he or she would be the person that helps make a lot of those decisions. And so we are putting up the best practices and controls in place until they come in, and then I think you'll probably see a few others.
Keith Sherman, thank you very much for presenting to our club.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Club members, before